Welcome to the Teens Talk podcast, created by the Student Virtual Board of Youth Celebrate Diversity.
YCD supports students and teachers organizing locally, educating themselves and their peers, and taking action for inclusion and social justice.
For more information, visit ycdiversity.org.
In this episode, board member Rhea interviews Mariangela Acosta, a deaf activist who shares what it's like being deaf in a hearing world.
Hello, YCD listeners. My name is Rhea, and I will be speaking today with my friend and activist, Mariangela, and today we will be discussing what it is like to be a deaf student. So if you would like to introduce yourself, Mariangela.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mariangela Acosta. Yes, I'm the only deaf student here at St. Mary's Academy. And my parents and I are actually from Lima, Peru, and I moved to here, Denver, Colorado when I was about 4 years old.
Oh, perfect. So I think I just want to start off today kind of just learning about you and your family and just who you are as a person.
Well, in terms of family, I have a huge family here in Peru. I have a huge family in Peru. We're actually the only family here in Colorado, but I'm always staying in touch with my family, and really my favorite things to do here is cooking, especially Peruvian food. I love cooking so much. I love to volunteer as well, especially with kids with different abilities. I volunteer at Rosie's Ranch, which is a summer camp for kids with different abilities. So I always go there every single summer. I love to play with my dog too. His name is Lucky, and he's a husky Labrador mix. We're always spending so much time together since I'm at home mostly all the time.
Yeah. I know I've seen Lucky on Zoom a couple of times in class, and he's very cute.
Thank you.
So I think right now I kind of would like to talk about what it was like learning about your diagnosis, how it was for your family, and how it affected kind of your life.
Well, if you're curious about how I became deaf, to be honest, I have no idea. Peru is kind of behind in terms of technology. Here in the United States, as soon as the baby's born, you do a hearing test. But in Peru, it's not like that at all. So my parents didn't find out immediately. It wasn't until about I was 7 months old that my parents noticed that I wasn't responding to sound, so they took me to the doctor and found out that I'm deaf. From that moment, I wore 2 hearing aids, and it wasn't until I was about 3 years old that I had a surgery on my left ear for a processor, which is a cochlear implant surgery. So ever since then, I have a hearing aid on my right ear and a processor on my left ear. I have no idea how I became deaf. Like, I wasn't sick or I didn't have any health condition that could have affected it. No clue. I do know that I have malformation on both of my cochleas, meaning that the nerve cells inside the cochlea weren't activated, so they were not able to send signals to my brain. But that's just as far as I know in terms of why I am deaf. But that's just pretty much how much I know about that.
And you mentioned like you had a cochlear implant on one side of your ear, and then what did you have on the other?
Hearing aid.
Hearing. And what's the difference between the two?
So a processor, it requires a surgery first of all, and it has a implant inside, meaning it has a little electrical cord that goes into your cochlea. What that does is sort of sounds like robotic sounds through the cells, and I don't know, I always say I feel that I have a bionic ear, but it's literally a mini robot on my ear, and it actually covers the high-pitched sounds. So if I didn't have a processor, I wouldn't be able to hear the beeping sounds of the microwave or the oven or the fire alarm. I wouldn't be able to hear those without my processor. The hearing aid is mostly more people have hearing aid is usually but those who have somewhat level of hearing. But if you're profoundly deaf and you cannot hear anything, sometimes hearing aids wouldn't work. That's why I had a processor on my left ear. But the hearing aid is more of like a device that amplifies the sounds. So whatever's on the outside, they just make it louder through my ear canal. And I've been having it on my right ear basically all my life.
Okay. And I remember because Mariangela and I have gone to school since 4th grade together. And when we were in elementary school, you had something that you wore around your neck and then the teacher also wore. What was that?
That was an FM system. Thankfully right now it's wireless, so I don't have to wear anything that connects to my hearing devices. But back then in 4th grade, not everybody had them actually. An FM system is just a way to connect. So the teacher usually has a microphone, and then back then I would wear something, and what that does is whatever the teacher is saying, it connects through the FM system and goes to my hearing devices so that I'm able to hear them clearly and loudly. Because if I didn't wear FM, whatever the teacher is talking, it goes throughout the classroom and it's harder for me to hear. So FM system, it just helps me hear the teacher way better and not having to worry about what did I miss. But over the years, it has become smaller and smaller to the point now that it's just all wireless. The teacher do have to wear a small microphone, but for me, it just connects with the hearing devices.
Oh, I'm glad like there's been a good steady like technological improvements. Yeah, that's good to hear. So taking it back to like when you first started school, how old were you and how was the adjustment from being at home and then going to a school setting?
Yeah, so basically ever since my parents found out that I was deaf at 7 months old, they've enrolled me to like mini classes for more mobility skills, verbal skills and such things. But it wasn't until I was about 1.5 years that I went to an oral school for the deaf, and that was in Peru, and it was called Fernando Eslava. And so I was literally surrounded by deaf and hard of hearing students, and we had speech therapy, practicing speaking, listening, and all of that stuff. But then when I moved to here, United States, that was when I was about 4 years old. I used to go to Temple of Emmanuel, which is a public school, I believe. I don't quite remember a while ago, but it's only a morning preschool program. And there's a school right next to it that is called Carson Elementary, and I would go for the afternoon preschool classes. So I would go back and forth. But then starting kindergarten, I continued at Carson Elementary, which is a public school, and it wasn't until 4th grade that I moved to SMA.
And how was it being in public school? Did they have good like accommodations for you?
In Carson Elementary, I was in the deaf and hard of hearing program. It is a very small class, and you are between 5 to 7 students. It's very small, and I remember that oftentimes I was quite bored in a way that the pace of the classes were quite slow, but it was in a way so that we can understand them clearly. But at the same time, I didn't feel I was posting up to actually excel and push myself harder. Because even though the teachers want to help the student, I do feel a little bit of like I was in a bubble, like being overprotected. And so that's why it wasn't until in the deaf and hard of hearing program, they provided speech therapies, FM systems, batteries, and all of that. It's all covered by the program because it's a public school which is funded by the government, so everything was covered. It wasn't until 4th grade that I mainstreamed into a sharing class, but it was actually hard at the first place because my teachers and the principal were actually against it and telling me that I shouldn't go because I would fail and so forth, until my dad saw the ADA, which is American with Disabilities Act, is a law passed in 1990, which is that all people with different ability has right to education. And when he saw that, they backed off. They couldn't do anything about it. So I was able to mainstream, but it was a huge change from being a tiny little 5 to 7 student class to like 30. It was a public school, so it was a very big class. It was a huge adjustment for me. I don't recall my friends going with me, but they stayed in the program. I'm not sure why, but it was a huge shift of kind of being the only deaf student. There were a few others, but they were a grade older than me because 4th grade and 5th grade were combined at Carson Elementary. So, and then when I moved to SMA, I took 3rd grade again because of the education that was from public to private. But it was a huge difference when I went to private school because I quickly learned that I had to take care of myself and look after myself, having to get my own FM system, having to make sure I have batteries in my backpack because at Carson, they have it always there. But for me, I always have to remember that I have it in my backpack. Otherwise, I would need to change batteries, and also meeting with teachers to let them know that I'm deaf and making sure I can read lips and so forth. And so it was a huge transition from public to private, and literally now kind of looking after myself in a way, because private schools, even though the 80-day doesn't apply because it's a private business, but still I have to find ways to make sure that I'm getting access to education.
And did you think that the elementary school that we went to together, do you think it was adequate and like a good needed push for like independence?
Well, I think because it was my first time being in a private school and being the only one, I didn't advocate for myself as much because it was so new to me that I didn't realize that I have to. And I wasn't very much aware of my rights too, in a way that things should have been given to me, not me reaching out to get them. But as long as I reached out to the teachers and if I didn't understand, I could meet with them after school and everything went well. But it was me reaching out quite a bit until at some point in the middle of the year or the end of the year that they kind of get to the point like, oh yeah, they have to like help me out. But it did take a while to like remind them.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I think like being in elementary school, we're all still so young, and it's nice to have like teachers come to you instead of always having to come to them. So kind of going into middle school, how was that adjustment? Because for our school that we went to, the elementary school and middle school were in 2 different buildings with a different principal, different everything. So how was that adjustment?
I actually felt more supportive in middle school with teachers. Actually, in middle school, there was a teacher that was in charge of like learning ability center in a way, like providing tutor and stuff like that. And me as a teenager and being very stubborn, I was actually didn't want help in a way, because like in terms of extensions and advanced notes and stuff like that, because I really wanted to prove everybody that I could handle it by myself. So I was very stubborn. No, I'm not going to do that because I really want to prove myself and to others that I can do anything. And so middle school, I could have like taken some help, but it was a rough. To be honest, middle school year was probably the toughest time in my life. But again, it was pretty similar in terms of reaching out to teachers. But then they were one-on-one with me, and going over the materials. And in middle school, I had tutor after school every once in a while to help me with English, especially since English is not my strongest strength. So I had help with that. But it wasn't until high school that I started getting accommodations and stuff like that.
And what accommodations did you get kind of high school, but like pre-COVID high school?
Yes. So at the beginning of the high school year, I began working with Miss May, who's our high school counselor. And I don't quite remember, but somehow I was eligible for the Bible section plan, or there was something else. The Bible section plan was kind of a law that people have right to education. The ADA is a little bit more in depth later on, but because of that, and because our high school council has somewhat understanding of accommodations, but then so freshman year, sorry, I'm just gonna get right to the point. But in freshman year, I began having extension time for my testing, especially in the SAT and ACT, stuff like that, because I've taken one before the extension and one after it, and I noticed a huge difference. Like my score was way better with the extension, so I was grateful that I have that. Advanced notes especially, I've never had that before. And in freshman year, if the teachers have slides, they would share with me before, and I could print them out. And then when I get to class, I could just write over the slides so that I don't have to write every single note. If they do sitting or anything, we just kind of rare in high school, but if they do, they always put me in the front row and making sure that I'm closest to the teacher. But I prefer to sit close to the teacher rather than in the back.
Okay, and if you don't mind me asking, kind of how was it socially during school for you when you originally switched from your program where you were surrounded by deaf students to leaving that?
Yeah, so college and elementary, I think in my deaf and hard of hearing program, I was surrounded by deaf kids who are like me. So I'm always having fun and being silly and just having a time in our lives, and of course we are friends and we fight and we play, and it's just like how friends are. And so I was never aware of my own identity until I mainstreamed at college elementary, and noticing that I'm kind of the only one surrounded by hearing students, and them seeing my hearing devices, asking me questions, it made me felt kind of self-conscious, and oh wow, I'm like being noticed so much. And I guess that way it kind of made me turn mature in a very young age. But then I have to figure out how I can respond in a kind way, because sometimes in my mind I have to go through this again, but at the same time trying to be polite because they don't know and we've never interacted before. So I always try my best to explain that being in the program, I'm with everybody who is just like me, so I was never aware of myself until I mainstreamed, and whoa, like I'm being the only one and have to learn to stand up for myself. And in some way it's good because I know how to show myself and be proud of my identity, but in some way I feel kind of sad that I have to grow up in such a young age. I still should be a kid, but I'm matured in a young age that I'm not protecting myself, making sure I'm good and also fourth grade was kind of the start of me, because I didn't like the way everyone was looking at me. I began to imitate as a hearing person, because I didn't like standing out at first. And when I would ask, can you please repeat? They make fun of me, or if I don't understand, they laugh at me. So that's why I didn't like those reactions. So I began, like, if I didn't understand, I'm like, oh yeah, because I'm basically trying to avoid those situations. So I began like guarding myself, and I didn't want to ever go through that again. And when I transitioned to SMA, I continued with that, but it wasn't until high school that I began to kind of let go and be myself and start asking for help. But it was a long journey, and I was just, watching out for myself, but also making sure that I'm understanding everything. So it's been a tough journey.
Mm-hmm. And like, not to compare kind of our situations, but also like similarly to you, like being the only Black student and then always being asked stuff, so I can somewhat understand your experience. So kind of transitioning to where we are now, since we're in a global pandemic with a lot of new restrictions and regulations, how has this time affected you?
Man, I would talk all day just about this, but when the pandemic first started, when we began wearing masks, it was tough for me because I could no longer lip read. For me as a deaf person, even though I have a sharing device that helps me hear, I depend mostly on lip reading. It's kind of like a puzzle that I lip read and listen, putting the two and two together. And so having the mask taking away lip reading was a huge challenge. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I didn't go out as much, so it wasn't a big of a deal. Now school, at the beginning of the pandemic, when we all went virtual, that was a huge change for me. And at that time, we had either Google Meet or Zoom, either one. At that time, there was no caption, so I solely had to base on lip reading on a blurry screen, and it was a tough battle because, and sometimes when students ask, there's a speaker mode thing where when someone else, it switched to that person, right? But it's like 5 seconds later and they're basically done with and so it was tough and I could not understand. I was literally just focusing on the notes and just kind of make sure I passed by the end of that. But it wasn't until this school year, at the beginning of the senior year, that a teacher at SMA showed me Google slide captions. And so I started using that with Zoom overlay. And so it was a lot of things to set up. And I started using that. It was super helpful. But the only downfall of it is I have to be quiet because the Google slide caption is based on the audio surrounding it. Mm-hmm. So if I like mumble or something, even though I'm muted, it would like cut some of my words and stuff. So I have to be absolutely quiet so that it translates. But it wasn't until like in the middle of the senior year that the Zoom started presenting those live transcript captions. But unfortunately, only teachers have access to that. I don't know if it's because of the level of like the type of the account they have. I know a student's account, they don't have it, so I'm not sure why. And they are actually quite helpful. Yeah, so virtually it's been tough with that. And I mean, I don't even know how I made it this year, but I did it. So I'm just like making sure I like pass for the rest of the semester. One thing I'd like to mention about the pandemic that it was a huge surprise to me was in the last summer when I was trying to get new hearing devices, a new hearing aid. I went to see the audiologist, and the desk where like how about your name and all that stuff. The receptionist had mask that is covered, and I was dumbfounded in a way because if they're working in the area that is providing services for people that are deaf or hard of hearing, then why not clear mask? So I felt, wow, like I thought they were supposed to be helping us, not making it harder. And then when I saw my audiologist for the hearing aid, she also wore a covered mask too. And it was hard, but luckily my dad was there and he had a clear mask, so he was able to help me. But it felt weird thinking audiologist wants to help deaf and hard of hearing people, but not wearing clear mask. So it was a huge difference. But so I have two audiologists because there are audiologists for processors and audiologists for hearing aids. I couldn't find one that does both, so I have two different ones. But when I go to see my audiologist of the processor, thankfully the audiologist does have clear masks, so I was able to understand. But I know it's very rare that audiologists and people working in that area are wearing covered mask, and it's just, it also makes me know that that's interesting. It shows that they're kind of expecting that deaf and hard of hearing people are listening. Like, I don't want to say like making them hearing people, but in a way that act as a hearing person. I don't know. So that's why it's very interesting to see that during the pandemic and realizing that I have to learn to listen, but it was a challenge, and not being able to go to the service that helps me and having covered masks. Yeah, so that was a huge event going on during the pandemic.
I think that was something that I learned when you came into one of our classes and you were talking about what this pandemic has been like for you. And I never even thought of the mask thing. Like, that was something totally new to me. And I'm glad you said that, because I would have never thought of it. And now, like, everywhere I'm going, I'm like, like, how are other people who do need to lip read, how do they know what's going on and what's being said? And so it's kind of weird to like look back at my own privilege in this whole situation.
Yeah, and in terms of the mask, like in school, like in person, I don't know because I haven't been in person yet. I will assume that I'm not really familiar with that, but in terms of Zoom, like virtual, it's just working with captions and one-on-one, and it's okay. But Zoom all day is definitely not a fan of that. But I'm just like trying to make a film.
And so, what accommodations has the school given you kind of during this time? Like, I know our teachers wear the clear mask and they also have like the captions on, but is there anything else that they do?
I know that some of the teachers allowed me to have breaks. So if I'm ever feeling that I've had it or I need time off, I just let them know, and they're totally understanding, and that will let me get off. But at the same time, I'm so stubborn that if I don't miss any material, through Zoom, I'm already behind. So being on Zoom, I'm gonna be even more behind. So I try to go through it. But if I had bad headaches, then I get off. But other than that, I don't know. I know that the school has been trying to make classes shorter and like less Zooming time and stuff, but it hasn't been working out too much, and teachers want to like push on the whole thing and stuff. So I just stay with it, because it's kind of hard when the school is saying that's what we're doing, but the outcome is not really that way, and I would really need more breaks in between, because last semester I pretty much have a full day, so it was really hard to even have like a 5 or 10 minute break in between without Zoom. But thankfully this semester I only have classes in the morning, so it's not too bad. But it still could have been a little bit more help. But it is challenging, especially that when you're the only one of a kind, it's hard to get your accommodation sometimes, because the school might be focusing on the majority, and it can be challenging to meet every single student's needs. But the only thing I would say is the amount of Zoom could have been less.
Yeah, for everyone listening, our classes are 1 hour and 30 minutes long, and so we have about 4 or 5 classes per day, so it's a very long day for us. But
Yes.
I do agree that I think more breaks are very much so needed.
Yes.
And was there anything else you think like our school could be doing to help you more during this time?
Yeah, I have brought this, excuse me, I have brought this up quite a bit, and every time the high school makes a video, like a homemade video with iMovie or so on, um, most of the time they don't have captions, and sometimes I have to reach out like, hey, can you please put on? And it takes forever to get them through, and sometimes they show up through the town meeting, and then there's no captions. I do feel like that's a huge part of it too, that if they are gonna present videos to everybody, make sure there are captions, because most of the time there wasn't, and I'm already missing out too much. So it would be really helpful that they could work on that. And also have them understand that it's better to have caption in the video, not having Google Slides or Zoom caption transcripted, because I've had several times that teachers ask me, can you just watch it with Google Slides? And I'm like, but it's not the same because it's not very accurate. And funny thing is, last semester when I was in a college writing class, and Miss Summers, who's our teacher at SMA, she was talking about thesis, and but it was kind of hard to lip read, and the caption was writing species. And I was like, Miss Summers, what did you say? And she said, thesis, and it wrote species in the caption. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you like put it in the chat? And when she put it in the chat, it was thesis. And I was like, oh, now I make sure, because it was like completely different. So oftentimes Google captions or Zoom captions are very inaccurate with words. And sometimes just one word can throw me completely off. And I have to like figure out, I'm pretty sure she said that it's not there, and it takes a lot of like mentality to like take our words and put it in and make sure that I understand everything.
Yeah, you're working extra during the school days.
Yes.
But, yeah, I think it's hard, or not hard. I think like our school, I think just doing the simple things like putting the captions on video, I feel like that wouldn't be hard. And obviously you're like a member of our community, and as a member, you should be included in everything that we do. So I think that's their fault, definitely.
Yeah, it is. It is challenging when I have to keep it into myself, and when the high school is saying we're doing our best to include, and I'm sure every student at SMA probably has some their own opinions on that. But that's why it's weird, because even me as a deaf person, I caption my videos too whenever homemade videos are made to, and making sure that everyone's included. Even though I'm deaf, I put caption, and it does take time depending how you do it, but that's just an easy fix, because that person shouldn't be waiting for days to get the caption go through, and also it just makes it easier that way, that there's no confusion on what the message is being said. Because online captions are terrible, but they're like very inaccurate with the captions.
So I know that you have friends who are in both public and private schools right now. How are they dealing kind of with everything that's going on?
My deaf friends, you mean?
Yes.
I don't know any other deaf friends in private schools. To be honest, I'm the only one, but I do have a couple in public. In DPS, we just stand for public schools that they go to. One of them has ASL interpreter through virtual classes and captioning as well, but she is with me on how the captions are very inaccurate, and how And also it's harder for my friend to reach out to teachers because in public school the classes are much larger and more students, so she has a harder time reaching out. And especially this year with college searching, my friend keeps asking me with questions about the verbs and the searches, and because I'm in such a small class in private, I'm able to get through them and stuff. But because my friend who is in a public school, she was not able to reach out like one-on-one, so I had to help out with her. That's one thing that I've noticed a huge difference between. But in terms of accessibility with captioning, that is pretty similar. Although I have another friend who goes to a public school, and the teachers at her school are not very patient with her and doesn't repeat things for her, which is unfortunate. Yeah, and I have other friends that are in college right now too, and they're online classes, which they're not a fan of either. So it's pretty similar, but I'm sure they have more experiences. But that's pretty much all I know when the things that they share with me.
And I guess like right now, would you have, or is there anything that you wish people understood who are not in the deaf community?
Speaking of the pandemic, I would say if the Bahada people are struggling to do something, don't step in and do the talking for them. Instead, approach to them and ask what they need help with and listen to them and let them tell you how you can help them. But I've had times where people have stepped over me and literally not letting me do anything and do things, and not even the way I wanted it to be. So it's make sure that you approach to them and ask if they need help, because the deaf community is very diverse. There are some people who are hearing devices, some don't. Some can talk, some don't. Some use ASL, which is American Sign Language. Some knows them, some don't. So there's a lot of variety of people. So don't assume that every person that is in the deaf community has same struggles or same approach to life. So make sure you approach to them and ask how you can help them rather than assuming you know what to do. And if you want to know more about the deaf or hard of hearing people, it's been popular lately at SMAs just to listen. Listen to them and listen to their stories. Once you take that in, it makes it easier to interact with them and talk with them rather than stepping over them because you're not even listening at the beginning. So just make sure you let them express their needs and express themselves.
And this was a question that I asked you before, but what is the difference between deaf with a lowercase d, deaf with an uppercase d, and then hard of hearing?
That's a very good question. I'm going to try my best to explain them clearly. First of all, it depends on the person and which term best resonates with them. It doesn't mean, it really depends to the person which one they most identify with. But the terms are hard of hearing. It means someone who has somewhat a mild to moderate hearing loss, meaning they still have some level of hearing. So that's just hard of hearing. That's just it. That's how simple that term is. Now, deaf with the lowercase d is more of like a medical term, and it's usually for those people who feel like they're not really fully immersed in the deaf community and don't really it's those who probably don't relate to much of the deaf culture or the deaf community or something. Most likely there might be in hearing community that they can't relate to the deaf community sometimes. So that's for those that identify themselves with lowercase d, deaf. Now deaf with the capital D is for those who identify their identity as a deaf person, that they're proud of their identity, that they own up to it, and that they are totally immersing themselves in the deaf community, with the deaf culture, using American Sign Language, viewing the deafness as their identity rather than a disability. It's deaf with the capital D is like owning up to like something to be proud of. It has a value, and it was a learning process for me because ever since I was young until middle school, I said deaf with the lowercase d, and I was clueless about the deaf community. But then in middle school, I started learning about American Sign Language, learning about the deaf community and the culture, and started being proud of who I am. And so then I changed to capital D, deaf. But it is a different learning process for anybody. It's really up to them which one they feel most connected with.
Well, those are pretty much, I think, all my questions. But I just want to say thank you, Mariangela, for letting me speak to you and letting me my words. But thank you for just coming on. I know like you're such a strong person. I've gotten to know you all the way since 4th grade, and I'm just so happy about it. And I'm just like really excited to see what you do in life, because we're seniors right now and it's our last couple weeks of school. And so I'm just really happy and proud of you and proud of the both of us for making it all the way.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to allow me to like educate the listeners here and just taking any opportunities to bring about the deaf awareness. So thank you for the opportunity.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider donating to support this work by youth activists across the country. Visit ycdiversity.org to make a donation or to get involved.